everybody. My name is, as you know, Stephanie Pereira. Thank you for the applause. I appreciate it. So I'm going to talk to you all today about Kickstarter. You are probably familiar with the website. Who here knows what Kickstarter is? Good. Who here has been on the website? And who has actually supported a project? And who has run a project? Okay, cool, good to know. So I'm going to talk to you today about Kickstarter. I'm probably going to talk about it in a way that maybe you haven't heard it talked about before, partially because I've worked at Kickstarter for 6 years, so it's like family to me. Partially because most people talk about it as a crowdfunding platform. I like to think of it as a place where we come to create things to make with other people. This is why Kickstarter was built, this idea that making things was hard, and it would be easier to do it if we could gather a group of friends around us to make projects together. So create something to share with others is sort of the thing I tell everyone to keep front of mind when you're thinking about making a Kickstarter campaign. So this is me on Kickstarter. I've actually now backed over 800 projects. So I think that part of my experience comes from working at Kickstarter and helping people make projects, but I think a lot of my knowledge and know-how comes from the fact that I've supported so many people. So by backing a project on Kickstarter, it means even for just $1, it means that you're automatically subscribed to the project as it unfolds, as they work to reach their funding goal, and as then they work to make their thing and deliver it into the world. And when you are subscribed, that means you get emails in your inbox and you learn a lot about the creative process along the way. So I've learned a lot about the creative process and also making a Kickstarter campaign through this. So on Kickstarter, we have 15 creative categories. If you are creating a project and it fits in one of our categories, it belongs on Kickstarter. And to date, since our launch in 2009, we've seen over 134,000 creative projects funded on Kickstarter. There have been over $3.3 billion pledged to projects from nearly every single country on Earth, by over 13.8 million people. So this is a big thing. This is, I went to art school, I actually studied photography, so every time I share these numbers I get really excited because to me this means that there is a true appetite for more creative work and that people are super excited to support each other in making creative work that would not otherwise exist if it weren't for websites like this one. Another important thing to know about Kickstarter, something that makes us unique in the world, is that we have an active and engaged community. So of that 13.8 million plus people, over 30% of them have pledged to more than one project on the site. And that 30% represent more than 60% of the dollars pledged on Kickstarter. So these are people that maybe arrived on the site originally to support a friend or maybe an old college roommate or a cousin or a niece or a nephew, but they stuck around. People come and they click that discover button, they browse projects in their category, they find things they like, and then they give money to those projects. So that's sort of like the brief intro to what is Kickstarter. Now I'm going to dig into how it works. I'm going to start from a very sort of high level, and I'm going to work our way down into a case study. Today I'm going to talk to you about a photo book. I know a lot of you are not working on books, but as sort of mentioned, I'm happy to take tons of questions and give you examples about how you can run your project on Kickstarter. So at the highest possible level, what is Kickstarter and how does it work? So as I mentioned, it has to be a creative project. It has to fit into one of our 15 categories. We ask for transparency on Kickstarter. So if you know what it is that you're making, maybe you have money coming from somewhere else, that's great. You should talk about that on the page. You should talk about what you think it's going to cost to make the thing. And then we do have some limitations. So we don't allow charity or cause funding, meaning like hurricane relief, for example. And of course, nothing called equity crowdfunding, which means offering a stake in your project in exchange for someone's support, or things like guns or weapons or other drugs, like prohibited stuff. So this is what a Kickstarter project page looks like, and what I want you to pay attention to is that up here you'll see that this project is trying to raise $5,000. They've raised just over $4,000 from 93 people, and they have 4 days left to go. So what this is demonstrating to you is what is called our all or nothing funding model, which means that when you launch a Kickstarter project, you give yourself a period of time to raise that money within. It's usually 30 days, that you can do as long as 60. And if you do not hit that funding goal, in this case $5,000, by the time your campaign ends, you do not get to keep any of that money. Again, this is called all or nothing funding. People ask often, that seems really unfair. Why can't I keep my $4,000? I don't understand. The short answer is that it works. If you launch a project and you know that you can't keep any of the money unless you hit your goal, you're going to do everything you can to hit that goal, and so are your supporters. The other thing is that it's less risk. So if you need $5,000 to do your thing and you only raise $4,000, where are you going to get that other $1,000 from? How are you going to give people all the rewards you promised them in exchange for their support? And finally, it's compelling. So you're going to see it in actually the examples I show you today. But if you are, you know you only, let's say, have 48 hours left in your campaign and you still have $1,000 left to raise, this is part of the story that you tell as you're running your project. So all or nothing is very scary to people, and mostly because of numbers like this. Only 36% of projects that launch on Kickstarter actually do reach that funding goal. That said, a full quarter of the 64% that don't reach their goal, that's 25% of them, don't even get a single pledge, which means they launch on the site and they just sit there. They don't tell anyone, no, their spouse, their child, their parent. No one gives them any money. No one cares. So it's almost like it's not real. On the flip side, we've seen that when someone launches and reaches just 20% of their funding goal, they succeed over 80% of the time. So this means that when you launch and you get those family members to come out, you get those college roommates, those cousins, whoever it is, your friends in your class, whatever it is, you have a very strong chance of success. We've also seen that, and this I think is really motivating to me, that when projects get to just 25 backers, that's 25 people, they succeed over 75% of the time. So that's not a lot of people. In fact, most Kickstarter projects succeed with just less than 100 people. Something like 80 people is the average number. So I think that 36% number I started with is very scary. These numbers hopefully will make you unscared. All those numbers hang on one important fact, which is that most people on Kickstarter are raising between $1,000 and $10,000. So if you're raising 10 to 20 or 20 to 100, it's going to take a lot more work to get that 20% funded, to get that momentum you need to be successful. So keep that in mind. So that's sort of the nuts and bolts of how Kickstarter works. I hope you guys were all writing down questions, because I know I went fast and there's a lot of information in there, and I'm happy to answer them afterwards. So we're going to dig into the sort of parts of a campaign and how you can start to think strategically about how you build a Kickstarter project. So there's three main parts. One is the project video. So for those of you who've spent some time on Kickstarter or given people money on Kickstarter, you've seen this video. We like to think of this like the invitation. This is where you're like, hey, what's up? My name is Stephanie. I'm working on a new photo project. Let me tell you about it. After that is the rewards, which provide direct access to your project or some sort of exclusive opportunity, the thing that you're making before anyone else gets it. And then the project updates. This is like the blog that's built into your campaign, or sometimes you can think of it as a newsletter. This is how you tell the ongoing story of your work. So I'm going to break each of these things into three parts and talk a little bit more about it. So first, as I said, the video is where you tell your story. I'm going to play you a montage that's 1 minute and 48 seconds long of some of our favorite Kickstarter project videos, and you're going to get a sense of how much information and energy and passion you can pack into less than 2 minutes.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
What's up, people?
Hi.
Hey. Hello. I thought we were gonna do hello.
Hi.
I love your new shoes. Are those new shoes?
Hi, my name is Raquel.
And I could go on, but this is a Kickstarter campaign video, and I haven't even told you what my project is yet. So the idea is this.
I'm writing a book.
A feature film.
Stop motion animations.
Sci-fi music video album.
You'll actually be able to buy a couture dress that they themselves
I
designed.
want to make a new graphic novel, and I want you to get some original art.
This time I decided to write things that were more lyrical.
I hope to make something strange and easy for you to enjoy.
I made a film called Codependent Lesbian Space Alien Seek Sane.
Right now, I'm sitting on over 200 hours of incredible footage.
I'd like your help to complete it.
Cut out all that extraneous stuff, all this extraneous costs, and get to the point, which is simply more art in front of more people.
The last piece of the puzzle is going to be you.
We cannot do this without you. We can't.
We need you to be a part of this. This is a collaborative experience.
If you back this Kickstarter project, you will be cool and everybody will like you.
I want to make a show that you don't just watch. Something unpredictable, strange, and maybe even amazing.
So let's do this thing.
I'm really excited for this. I think that this is worth doing.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching our Kickstarter video.
Let's go make a story.
We can make it together.
So I've officially seen that like 7,000 times. I smile every time. One thing you probably noticed, there's a lot of faces. Kickstarter is about people talking to people. I actually don't really like the word crowdfunding because of the word crowd. It is not about a faceless crowd. It is not about strangers on the internet. It's very much about human beings talking to a room full of human beings. So once you've made your video, you've invited people in to be a part of your process, this is where it's important to connect with them and engage them through exciting rewards. Rewards are typically a copy of the thing that you're making. So if you are a photographer and you want to travel to some far off amazing place and take a bunch of photographs, it means that your supporters are going to get some of those photographs that you take on your trip, or at least one. It's also an invitation to be a part of the creative process of your work and to have a shared experience. That might mean that you use your project updates to share photos as you travel through our digital platform. Maybe you share a photo along with some notes. You might invite people to your studio to check out your work in progress. You might do a live stream. We have a live streaming tool on our website where you invite people sort of virtually into your studio and talk about some of the work you're doing. These rewards are very important. The most successful Kickstarter projects have really great rewards on them. This is what differentiates a Kickstarter project from like a fundraiser, like putting a PayPal button up or going on something like GoFundMe and just saying, hey, I want to go on a trip, can you give me some money? So these rewards, $25 is the most common pledge. This is where people are very willing to part with their hard-earned cash in exchange for something of value, and again, something like a photograph. The ideal number of reward tiers, what I'm trying to say here is not a ton. Between 5 and 7 is great. Most people do have more like 12 to 15. I will say that's not necessary. You can definitely stick with less. And then the $100 tier is actually quite powerful on Kickstarter, but because while it is less popular, people are willing to go there. So if you do have something very special to offer, let's say a limited edition print is very common at this level, this is where you could offer it and really sell it to people. So we have your video where you've invited people in, they're very excited, they want this to happen, your rewards, you've offered them something meaningful in exchange for their support, and this is how you keep folks engaged. So the way that this works, the project updates, is if someone pledges just a single dollar to your project, they are automatically subscribed to your updates, which means that not only do they appear on your project page, they also appear in their inboxes. So it's kind of like a newsletter and a blog all rolled up in one. So I'm going to dive into a case study, but I just want to say one more important thing in case I didn't really hammer this point home. The people who support you, these magical people, they are not a crowd, they are a community of people. They most commonly are people that you know. We've seen that email is the most powerful way to drive people to your project. After that, it is Facebook. Facebook is great because not only are individuals coming to you, but individuals are helping you to share your story. And those are really the two biggest things. Kickstarter also plays a part. So in the arts category, we see something like 10 to 25% of pledges can come from our platform, but really that initial 20%, that initial 30% of funding does need to come from your own community. Okay, so I'm going to show you a case study. It's actually kind of old. I stick with it because I love it. I love this project. It's an unusual project. It's something that I think would never be sort of commercially available, but did very well on Kickstarter. So this is by an LA-based photographer named Chris Anthony. He's not a full-time photographer. He does a lot of things. One of the things he does is make these sort of unusual, kind of mystical photographs using old-fashioned photo processes. So you can see that he raised over $21,000 from 160 people. You might remember from the stats I shared earlier, this is a lot of money. Like I said, most people are raising between $1,000 and $10,000 from less than 100 people. So this was a big project. I think it's worth sharing despite its unusual size because it has a very human scale in the work that he did. It feels like something that I could do or hopefully one of you guys can do. So I'm going to show you his project video, which I actually met him when I was in LA a few years ago. He said he just made it on iMovie. He hadn't really made a video before. This was like a fun experiment for him.
My name is Chris Anthony. I'm a photographer, and for about the past 18 months, I've been working on a new series of images, and the reason for this Kickstarter campaign is to publish a book of these new photographs, which consists mainly of wet plate collodion or tintype photographs. This is a beautiful photographic process that was invented in the mid-19th century and still to this day has passionate practitioners using this method all around the world. It's a wonderful antidote to all things digital within photography and an alternative to those wanting to work photochemically and are increasingly being deprived of film stocks to use. I've tried to avoid working with a very rigid theme or set of guidelines on this series, and have wanted to take pictures of things that mean a lot to me personally, through themes of solitude, hope, and survival. Making the masks and many of the props and costumes is a big part of the process, and it helps me define this unique and demented little world I live and shoot in. The mysteries of the sea is certainly a big part of the subject matter in these pictures, and I like to think that the book ends with a sort of crescendo of color images depicting survivors, braving waves and currents, perhaps the result of a future world where ocean tides will wash away the planet's coastlines. Thank you very much for considering this Kickstarter campaign and helping to fund the publication of this book.
So it was a pretty classic Kickstarter video. It was less than 3 minutes. Most videos these days are less than 2 minutes. As I mentioned, he used iMovie. For those of you who have played around in iMovie, you'll recognize that music. That's just stock music that's built into the app. I do recommend using music. I would not actually recommend using iMovie music. There's so many great repositories for royalty-free music, or just paying like $5 or something and get a song that feels really unique and really special to you. If you know any independent musicians, you can also invite them to share their music using in their video, and then just in your video, and then crediting them on your page is a totally normal thing to do on Kickstarter. Some things to point out: we saw tons of the work that is key in every Kickstarter video. We also saw Chris himself. He clearly didn't love being on camera, but he took time to put himself in the frame for at least a few seconds on 2 different parts. He used voiceover, which is very typical on a Kickstarter photography project, to show lots of photos and narrate over the photographs. And then finally, there was a very clear call to action at the end, where so he talked about his creative process throughout, which is incredible, and then he very clearly at the end invited people to be a part of it. So that was like a very classic Kickstarter video. So we do give you some stats on how many people play your video and how many people watch it all the way through. This is pretty typical. Most people, if you see 24.61 of plays completed, that's pretty usual. Most people don't actually watch the video all the way through. They might click play, they'll watch maybe the first 30 seconds of it, scroll through your page, look at the rewards, choose a reward, and then check out. So it's not like most people don't watch it all the way to the end. So okay, that was the invitation, as you remember. So now the rewards. So Chris did something really smart here, in that he offered the photographs. So he had a very nice book that he was making, but which was pretty expensive. So he offered photographs, book, fancy version of book, fancy version of photographs. So let me show you the breakdown. So he created an ebook version, full color, great on iPad version of the book that you could get for $20, which you can see 22 people went for. He also offered a 4x5 open edition print, which actually I backed for. I have it in my house. It's hanging on my son's wall. It's beautiful. And then you could see that at $65, you can get a standard edition of book. You can get a limited edition for $85. This is something you could do on Kickstarter. You could see limited, 77 of 100 left. You can offer limited editions. And then he had nice versions of the book with print, and then he had like a very, very fancy version of the whole package. So this is like a very nice way to think about the spectrum of support on Kickstarter. If you remember, I said the most common pledge is $25. The average pledge tends to be about $79 or $80, depending on the category. You could see also he had a pretty even split of support across all the reward tiers, which means that he really knew his audience well. It's not unusual on a Kickstarter project, for example, to see like the book being the most popular. So like 100 people go for the book, and then maybe less people go for the other stuff. But this is a really nice split of engagement. Here's a way of looking at that sort of in a graph form. 76% of people pledged between $20 and $120. The average pledge was $134. So he had a much higher average than you do see across Kickstarter. It's partially because of that, some of those higher tiers that he offered. So this is, as I mentioned earlier, you can run a Kickstarter anywhere between 1 and 60 days. Almost no one does 60 days. Most people do 30 days. Some people do 45. I highly recommend 30 days, and this is why. So most people launch and see a bunch of momentum. That momentum is because this is where you reach out to people who already know you, know your work. Maybe you have a Facebook fan page. These are your Facebook fans. Maybe you have a newsletter. This is your newsletter people. You get a big spike from those people, and that's very important. That we've seen that if you hit that 20 to 30% mark I mentioned earlier in the first 24 hours, you have a 90% success rate. So you get this big spike, it's really exciting, times are good, and then there's this long, quiet period in the middle that someone affectionately named the trough, and it's stuck, because you could see not much activity happens. Maybe you'll get some press, or maybe you send out an exciting update saying, hey, we introduced a brand new reward tier, get it now. Something that motivates people to be excited about sharing your project and telling other people about it, but for the most part, it's pretty quiet. And then very typical at the end, you see this big uptick, because this is where the sort of limited time offer, like you have 30 days, this is over, and then it's never happening again. This is where that really kicks in, and you'll see the final 72 to 48 hours is usually a big uptick in support. If you extend past 30 days, if you go to 45 days or 60 days, what happens is you just extend that middle trough period. So you just end up with a lot more frustrating, not a lot of activity happening. In fact, we once told this to someone, and his response was to shorten his campaign to 11 days. He's like, well, I'm just going to get rid of the trough, and it worked. He just had it all uphill. I don't recommend doing that. That sounds really stressful and like a lot of work, like you're constantly managing things. This is what his refer chart looked like. So as I mentioned, something like 10 to 25% of money does come in through the Kickstarter platform on a typical arts project. You can see in this case, 3,600 came in via Kickstarter, and that 17,000 came in through email channels and Facebook. as I mentioned earlier, this is a old campaign. It's from 2013. So our refer chart actually now looks like this. So I wanted to make sure that I got it in front of you. We've added a new tool, which is called custom ref tags. And this is a way for you, for those more marketing savvy people in the room, when you launch your campaign, you can create a special little code that you add to the end of your URL. So let's say on like, December 10th on Facebook, you announce you have a brand new reward, and you say like it's only going to be available for the next day, because you can time limit rewards on Kickstarter as well as a way to create urgency. You can test the performance of that post by creating this special tag and you put it at the end of it. So in this particular case, this creator used it quite heavily. So this sort of purple area here reflects all the sort of custom refer marketing that she did to make this happen. You could see though there was still about 24% pledge via Kickstarter, so that was pretty typical. Okay, so we went through the video again, invitation, rewards, exclusive opportunity. This is what the update compose panel looks like. So I mentioned updates or something like a blog or a newsletter all mashed up into one. It should look very familiar to you. This is like just like writing an email, right? You have a subject line, you have some space to add in media, photo, video, sound, whatever you like. You can lock it so that only your supporters can see the post. So this is maybe where you want to share special exclusive things that you said only your backers can see. Let's say again you're funding a trip to some far off place. One of your core rewards that you offer is that you send updates from each place you travel to. So you could lock those to only backers getting them. And then who should be notified means that you can decide who actually gets it in their inbox. So again, if you're locking it to a specific tier, like only your $20 and up people actually get it delivered to their inbox, you could do that. You can also use this to sort of decide if you're sending like a kind of more mundane, like, hey, $100 slipcover case book people, your books are in the mail. You can make sure that only those people are notified. So this is a project update. So this is a pretty typical update. This is the first one Chris sent in his campaign. You remember that big uptick he had on that first day? So he's pretty excited at this point. He's thanking everyone for their support. He can't believe how many people blogged and emailed and Twittered about it. That's his word. He said that he's been making work while all this is happening. So he's sharing a photo of his work. This is great. This is exactly the kind of sort of creative content you want to share with people. You want to make sure you're not just asking them for money for the entire duration of your campaign. On the flip side, he's got now 48 hours left, and they're only 80% funded. So you remember I pointed out in his funding graph there was that big uptick in the last 48 hours. This was him doing that final push, as well as his supporters helping him do that final push, which is so key. So this is him sort of reaching out to the existing backers and saying, this is happening, here's the link to my project, please tell everyone you know about it, there's only 2 days left to go. And so this is where that all or nothing funding model, the urgency of it really comes into play, where everyone, your whole community of supporters sort of bands together to make it happen. And he includes some images of his work to make it super easy to share as well. After he's been funded, he, of course, sends a thank you message. This is super important. He continues to share his work. He also shares some press that he got, and he tells them what's coming next. Much later on, so that was in October, now in March, he's got some advanced copies of the book. He's super excited about it, and he's sharing it with his supporters, and he makes sure to say thank you yet again. You can use project updates for as long as you want. Once you build a community on Kickstarter, these are your people. You can anytime, even this was in 2013, if Chris wanted to today in 2017, he could go back to his campaign, he could compose a new update for folks, send it out, and let people know what he's up to. So this is an incredible community that you should absolutely not stop communicating with, because they've already shown their support, they've shown they're interested in you. I just want to show you one more thing in this case study, and then we're going to go to Q&A. So have questions ready. So you might remember this was a picture of the project page. This campaign is from before we rolled out something called Spotlight. So now, once you've funded a project on Kickstarter, you have the opportunity to take the sort of generic Kickstarter profile project page and turn it into something that's more your own. So you can change the background color, you can change the font color, and then you could add this nice big button. So if you have your own website, or you could write buy the book, you could write follow me on Facebook, you could do sign my newsletter, you could do whatever you want with this button. You could change your project image, and really the focus becomes on you and the work that you made rather than you and the campaign that you made. So this is a really nice tool, and I highly recommend if you do Kickstarter to use it. Cool. All right, thank you everybody.
Thank you.